So first, thank you for all of you to be here, and also thank you for South Summit to make it possible. You know, this Space Tech Vertical that they had not only the vision to do it, but also like everything in investment, they took the risk and they execute, I think, in a very brilliant way. You know, so you know, space is there. The macroeconomics says that in year 2014, this is going to be about $1 trillion business, so it's going to be a huge business. Was something like 350 billion year 2020. It's going to be something about 700 billion year 2030. And there's a lot of, as the previous panel mentioned, there's a lot of big challenges to accomplish. And the most important, whole new way to operate, you know. We are going for large constellations, mostly every single service that we can imagine and we can have in our pocket or in our business will be influenced by space. And we have, I would say, largely exceptional support from governments and institutions. But from now on, this is not enough, you know, and I think this is it. We need a lot of investors, a lot of new companies to join and to make the things together. So we have here three representatives of very different worlds, you know. We have Luca from ESA. I think ESA has been one of the biggest worldwide enablers to make space possible. Estelle is coming from one of the leading fund in Europe. So they're doing that. I think they're a great example. And we have Teresa, which is a pioneer, someone that took the risk 10 years ago, not 2 years ago, 10 years ago, with some of the best companies that we have today in Europe. So the aim of this goal is you know, encourage all of the normal ecosystem, that normal investors, normal entrepreneurs to join this world. You know? So I would like to start from Luca. The ESA has been making lots of things over the years, but now you're doing new things like the department and the whole division and the projects that you are running. And for most of us and for most of the audience, this is quite new. You know, it's not only promoting missions, but it's really promoting an ecosystem. So, Luca, I would like you to describe what are you doing now from ESA?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Well, as you say, it's new. My department, it's not only new. I am not only the head of this department, I am the first head of this department. So this department, the idea of accompanying the entrepreneur's life along the entire life cycle of the existence of a company was not there. Actually, for many years, for 60 years, ESA have been focusing on developing research and technology, research and development of systems for product and services, bringing them from TRL1 up to TRL9, having a product or a service ready on the market. Now, with this new department, we are trying to complement this type of activities by adding a range of services to boost let's say, the development of the entire ecosystem, in particular, opening up to the new space community. So in this case, we are deploying a range of services in support of all the stakeholders, meaning the startups, the new entrants, but also the investor community. You mentioned some very interesting figures. This is the global dimension of the space economy. But what is interesting is also the figures corresponding to private investors. So worldwide, I think 2 years ago, we peaked the volume of 13 billions per year, which is a remarkable investment. Let's say it's twice the size of the budget of ESA per year. And this arrived just in 6 years, so an exponential growth. So in Europe, we are starting from a very, very small dimension, unfortunately. It's not comparable. Let's say the investment volume, private investment volume, a few years ago was really minimal. But thanks to these services that we are now putting in place in support of the investor community, so really helping them, now we are seeing some outstanding results, I must say. And last year, due to the geostrategic crisis ongoing worldwide, this private investment have begun to decrease a little bit, and we understand. I mean, it's a difficult moment, but in Europe, I would say also thanks to our colleagues, but also obviously to institutions, we have witnessed that plus 66% of private investment. So I think that the private investors ecosystem in Europe is starting to understand. I also have a sneak peek of the figures for the first quarter this year. This trend is continuing. It's continuing in a moment where, in general terms, the space is considered to be one of the three strongest sectors worldwide in which to invest in this very difficult time of crisis. So I think this is where the action of ESA is present. We have set up a partnership with the major investment fund. Of course, Promos was one of the first to join, and we assist them by providing, let's say, access to our deal flows, so to our community of startups. We have some more than 1,500 companies incubated in our business incubation centers. We provide technical assistance and view also of the market opportunities. So let's say we are really deploying a lot of efforts and energy there.
I think it's amazing. And in some of the conversations we had before, I think you say something was very remarkable. You say, we don't invest, we don't take share. And I think it's very important for investors, you know.
Exactly.
You enable a lot of investments because you dilute the risk and you do things where investor could have a much safer environment to invest.
We are zero equity. Zero equity. We leave the equity business to the private investors, of course. So in our case, we provide grants to our business incubated company, but we are deploying not just grant. I mean, grant is seeds money. What is important for a company incubated in our system is the quality stamps that comes from having been selected by the agency. So this is the most important thing, the thing that attracts more also investors. And the second more important thing is to have real customers, a real business, not just governmental type of supports or grants, but real customer. And this is a completely different activity because so far institutions have been really focusing on the research and development part, but not really engaged in the market. So now we have understood that, especially in this moment, we have to act also on the market, so also beyond TRL9. And this is where we have set up a marketplace where we help and support our companies to explore emerging new markets and attracting and capturing largest share of the markets with the goal, with the aim of showcasing these results to the private investor community and to show to them who are the companies that have the best opportunity to scale up and grow on the market. We don't just want to have small companies, we want to have champions that are capable to compete. I mean, our companies cannot, in Europe, that's the peculiarity, they do not have a vast, solid and strong institutional captive markets. They have to be strong because they have to fight on the global commercial markets. This is why we have to help them a little bit.
Thank you very much. I think it's an amazing program, and sometimes we are claiming large, let's say, traditional institutions to change, and I think it's amazing how ESA has changed over the last months, I would say over the last years. Estelle, you work for a fund that, if it is not the leader in Europe, is one of the top leaders, you know, so, but you are not new, you not were born yesterday. You are coming for a fund that I guess is 10, 12 years old right now, I think since the beginning you were working in deep tech, and how, because you know, for the rest of the funds, how is this? How did you do in the past, and how is this transition to a space that that you did, and how would you say to the rest of the funds to come to this sector that because we need everyone here. Eh?
Yeah, so as you said, I mean, Promus has been around for about 11 years now. We started out in the US, so it's a fund that spun out of a large family business that's made up of high net worth individuals, and that basically wanted to invest more into deep tech companies and set up and take more risks into investments. So they set up the Promus Ventures venture capital firm in Chicago, so 11 years ago, and started to invest in deep tech, mostly into robotic companies and companies that have and still have a large link with space sector, and started with some investments also in the space sector with large companies such as Rocket Lab, ICEYE, but also Spire. I mean, ICEYE, just to mention some of the rationale behind it. The company was not yet fully established. We came into the Series A, and we did this investment as part of the, I mean, it was one of the first company to actually provide SAR imagery, so imagery that could detect objects and detect the atmosphere, even with the clouds. So it could, it was one of the first company to do that, and was the leader on the market. It was not yet fully established, but it had already developed some satellites and launched into orbit, so it had demonstrated the technology in a way. But it was still a major risk, and the market was still emerging. So that's part of a mentality that was framed around deep tech, and this idea that we invest into really disruptive companies that leverage new infrastructure through highly established industries with data analytics and the power of analytics with AI and new advances into technologies. So that was the frame around the first funds of Promus Ventures, which were really deep tech focused funds based in the US, but had an incentive to invest into this new sector, a new domain that was emerging, and that was leveraging really new technologies and disruptive ways to do analytics in the sector and benefit also other sector and other domains. So that was kind of the setup. And then 2.5 years ago, we were approached by Europe to set up a fund in Europe that's based out of Luxembourg, still through Promus Ventures, but it's called Orbital Ventures, and which is a 180 million fund that invests only into space companies, and with which we've made already approximately 12 investments to date. Some of the most investments that we made are exploration company, Ellipsis Drive, for instance. We also did some robotics, companies such as Robco, and all of these companies, they leverage space technologies in a way, and are able to expand to other markets and really unlock new potentials. So I think that's the main idea to understand also, is that space is not only about rockets and launching satellites. This is the upstream, which is of course very capital intensive, takes more time to go to market and provide returns on investments, but that can still unlock new business models. And on the other side, you still have downstream investments that leverage data analytics and that are still a huge part of the market, and where companies and investors, and we see it a lot, they would start generally with investing into downstream companies that are maybe more accessible because they are software driven. They use business models that are more comparable to other domains that they are used to, especially in the tech sector, and that are more accessible. So that's kind of the big picture. But overall, I mean, I think that there's still a lot to be done in the space sector. And right now, other investors and generalist funds are starting to understand it and leverage, I mean, specialist funds such as ours to help them and co-invest with them.
Just to share with the audience, you know, because you are you are one of the early investors of ICEYE, you know, and how different is the dimensions, you know. I think ICEYE, as a private company, has the largest investment in Europe, I guess, more or less, which is about 200 million, right?
Yeah.
So this is like a typical round, I would say, among A and B in a marketplace. So dimensions are really big, but as you mentioned, the market is huge for the rest of it, and you need to think a bit different and to take risk in another way, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, ICEYE was one of the first to develop the SAR technology, and it was a big disruption
what is SAR?
at the time. Sorry?
What is SAR?
It's just a way that you are able to detect in the atmosphere through the clouds using infrared and microwave sensors. So you are able to unlock new possibilities to really detect atmospheric variables that are necessary to understand some of the climate change variables in the world. So
A game changer at the end.
yeah, and it was at the time one of the first company to do that, and the leading one. Now there's a couple more that are entering the market. I can mention Capella Space, for instance. But ICEYE is still the leader in this domain and still developing new manufacturing of satellites that it is able to sell to other satellite operators right now, and providing huge return on investments, obviously.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Teresa, so you are last but not least. You, like in the space, you're a true pioneer, you know, when nobody was investing from, let's say, very private equity, let's say, on money. You did it 10 years ago. You invested in the PLD, this launcher, and you know, now that everything's become more easy, let's say, or more normal, and you have programs like ESA and big funds to follow up, like Promos, why did you do that? You know, how was the process to get there? Because you were not coming from that war. It's just some kind knock your door, and how did you get there? You know.
Well, as you mentioned, first, good morning, everyone. So, and thank you for inviting me. It was already 10 years ago where I would say I didn't know anything around space, other than the rocket used to explode. You know, that's my, let's say, feeling. So when someone came to me and let me know, why don't you invest in here? You know, I say, well, I don't know a word about that. And I made my, let's say, technical due diligence, and I said, this is a very capital-intensive initiative, which we will speak later on maybe, but it's not only, this is not all the, let's say, space initiatives are like the launchers one, so, but this specifically was very capital-intensive. It was a long-term return capital, and I said, well, even if it is very profitable, because the reality is that it's a business which is very profitable. Once you get the stable operations, doesn't make any sense for me, you know, because I was a very small investor and so on. So, and when I say, well, no, that I will not do so, they told me, no, don't tell not. Just came where the founders were based, listen to them, and see. And say, well, okay, I take the time. I take the train, because they were based in Elche, which for the Spanish persons is where it, well, they know where it is, but you know, it's 100 kilometers from Madrid, so on. And I spoke with them, and they really convinced me, you know. Well, first, as young guys, they were very energized, very convinced, which, by the way, is an attribute of nearly every founder. But, I realize how strategic is the initiative for the country, providing Spain the ability to, let's say, reach the space is something which really will make a difference. I realized how many, let's say, talented people will be needed to execute the operations in itself and execute the program. So I said it would be a good initiative to retain and attract talent which is working outside. We were based initially in Elche, and now we have operations in Teruel, and we are about to launch in Huelva, which are cities which is not a centralized, let's say, way of doing business in this country. So I said it do have many, many components that tell my heart that's maybe something that I will need to invest, not because of the financial return, but because, how important this could be for our country and our people and so on. And so I said, well, let's try, let's do it. And, I'm here 10 years later. we are here.
And if you have to redo the math now, will the Excel looks different in terms of risk and in terms realizing that the market is different?
Well,
will it be easier for you to take the decision today?
Well, I would say today I will perceive the risk very different. That's one thing. So, and the reason is that now I understand a little bit better which is the industry about, which at that time I didn't know nothing about. And from the maths, as you said, I think that there is a lot of things that, you start to see close to what I saw in the past, So I see really we are about to launch. I see that we will have clients. I see that, we will be able to compete even with incumbents, even with the Americans. So, I think that the maths will be, let's say, has a better, let's say, look like.
Okay. So now, Luca, back to you. You have an amazing program. If you make a little bit of research about what was ISA doing in the past and what you're doing now, you have a lot of programs in place and a lot of tools. 2 questions in a row for you. What would you demand from the private sector, to leverage on this big opportunity, on the big tools? And second, what is your next launch, from your department or your initiative perspective?
Interesting question. Thanks a lot. Well, listening now to the previous speakers, I think that what is important, there are 3 ingredients that are essential. We need the talents, that's for sure. We need the capital. And, well, we need the speed, because, let's say, this is something that, it's not typical of institutions. I mean, when you manage taxpayers' money, you have a huge responsibility. The sector is really risk adverse. So you don't want to introduce innovation for the sake of innovation or just to go faster. You want simply to minimize the risk. You don't want to see rocket exploding, especially when they are funded with taxpayers' money. And you want to maximize the performance. Now, these are 2 things that have nothing to do with the commercial sector, where the parameters are the time to market, the customer satisfaction, the return on the investment. So speed is of essence. So talent, capital, and speed. At the same time, if you ask me what to expect now from the investor community, is patience. It's not speed, it's patience. Because we have been working a lot on the so-called early stage type of investors. I mean, venture capital community, seeds, okay, a lot still to be done, it's clear, but we see some good trends. It's on the right track. Still has to go, but it is on the right track. What we are missing now, for time being, are good exit. So, I mean, what is the exit of my colleagues? It's to sell the company at profit to somebody else. It can be an IPO on the public market, it can be a private equity, it can be a late stage, a growth stage type of investment. There is where we need to put more energy. In this moment, this type of investors, which are patient investors, they have not the same let's say, time framework of venture capitals, which is between 10 and 12 years, more or less. So they have to go fast and get an exit. These others are more patient type of investors. However, they are patient, they are not looking for big figures of growth, not necessarily, but stable, and they are not at all familiar with space. For them, space is still associated with big risk of failure. So it is where we are now investing more energy in educating this community, that's one thing, but also in integrating space more and more in the business verticals, in the industrial verticals, which are more traditional and well known by these late stage growth investors. Because in this way, let's say automotive, energy, pharmaceutical, when space is part of it, for them it's a no-brainer. Let's say it's a question of merger and acquisition. So this is where we want to go more and more. So this is what we are we expect to do more with, let's say, the private investor community. And let's also not neglect another thing, that is the access to finance in general is not just investment, is also debt, is also loans, credit. This is super difficult for small companies, entrants, to go to a bank and ask for a loan when you are in the space market. So this is where we are working. It's one of the next big thing that we are launching together with the European Investment Bank to set up guarantee platform for the retail bank in order that they can be reassured and issue loan, let's say, at more favorable conditions.
And Estelle, the same question for you, but just from the other side of the mirror. You have Luca here, you have Miguel from the Spanish Space Agency. From the private sector investment, what do you expect from them to go bigger? I wouldn't say faster, as Luca mentioned, but bigger in the next years.
Yeah, I mean, I think Luca touched on some very interesting points, actually, and for us, it's a bit the same rationale in the way that we were able to leverage the VC community, and we start to see more VCs in Europe getting interested and acquainted with the space sector. We co-invest together. I mean, we really see that it's a community in space in particular where investors, but also companies really work together. There's a really good environment, and I think everyone helps each other, and it's really nice to see this. But now the real challenge is also to get more interest from really late stage investors, and for us as investors, as VC fund, it's also getting interest from LPs and from investors that are going to invest in our fund and that are going to understand our development cycles and our return on investments, and the way that sectors such as space and deep tech in general work, which is a bit longer than tech, HR SaaS, or other businesses in the tech sector that are very fast and that are easy to understand. But try to really get this community more acquainted, more aware, and more interested also into investing in funds that are investing in space.
Okay. And finally, Teresa, you're closing the session. As a true pioneer, we have a lot of people watching and streaming, and you have the selling pitch, for the investor community, for the industry community, in a fraction. This change of mind that you did is what normal investors need to do, and you are the example that things could go well. So the audience is yours.
Well, what I would say is, I think, I hear a lot of things, all good ideas, let's say, but I will say more of these ideas need to happen quickly that, it's happening today. We are in Europe, we are in Spain, we are competing with the Americans, we are competing, with the others that are really passing through. So I think all the good plans, I hear Miguel is excellent, but they say, we are doing now the plan, and say, what, the plan? But it needs to be done already, So I think speed for us, I think for the small investors are important, and for the companies and the startups, And the other thing is, just know where I encourage the potential private investors to know better the space industry, because as mentioned, it's not that risky, as said. There is more than launch vehicles, which are the capital intensive ones, but there's many other type of initiative in which you can invest, like, infrastructure, telecommunication, data, software, blah, blah, blah. So diversify your investments, take the challenge, take the risk, and invest in the space.
Okay. So thank you very much. And all of you are welcome to invest in the space.